The blood on the floor wasn't what scared me. I've seen blood. I've waded through it in places most people can't find on a map. What scared me was the silence. The nurses weren't rushing anymore. The doctors were looking down at their clipboards, avoiding my eyes. My wife, Violet, was behind those double doors. And she was pregnant. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. I don't remember the drive to the hospital. My mind had gone into a strange, cold place. The place it goes when I'm downrange, holding a rifle, waiting for the command to breach. It's a survival mechanism. If you feel too much, you hesitate. If you hesitate, you die. But I wasn't in a war zone. I was in Seattle. I was supposed to be picking up cribs and painting the nursery this weekend. Mr. Hunter. I snapped my head toward the voice. A doctor, looking too young and too tired, stood by the reception desk. He looked like he'd been crying, or maybe he was just exhausted. In his hand, he held a clear plastic bag containing a familiar object, Violet's wedding ring. The band was bent, smashed. Where is she? I asked. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded like gravel grinding against steel. She's in the ICU, sir, the doctor said softly. But you need to prepare yourself before you go in. The damage. It's extensive. Is the baby okay? The silence that followed was loud enough to shatter windows. The doctor didn't answer. He didn't have to. I felt the air leave the room. My knees, which have carried 100-pound rucksacks up mountains, felt like they were about to buckle. Who did this? I whispered. Police are in the waiting room, he said. They're waiting for a statement. I walked past him. I didn't want to talk to the police. I wanted to see my wife. When I entered the room, the first thing I heard was the rhythmic beep, beep, beep of the monitors. Tubes. Wires. Bandages wrapped around her head so thick, she looked like a stranger. Her face, the face I kissed this morning before I went for my run, was swollen, purple, and black. Her lip was split. Her jaw was wired shut. I walked to the side of the bed. My hand hovered over hers, afraid to touch her, afraid I might hurt her more. Violet, I choked out. She didn't move. I looked down at her stomach. The swell was there, but something felt wrong. There was a flatness to the energy in the room, a grief that hung heavy in the sterilized air. I sat there for an hour, just watching her chest rise and fall, praying to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. I promised everything. Take my legs. Take my eyes. Just let them be okay. Then the door opened. A man in a cheap suit walked in. Detective Kyle. I knew the type. Burned out, underpaid, and looking for the easiest way to close a file. Mr. Hunter, Kyle said, closing the door behind him. I'm sorry about your wife. Who did it? I asked, not looking away from Violet. We have a situation, Kyle said, shifting uncomfortably. Witnesses at the scene. They're telling a conflicting story. I turned slowly. Conflicting. My wife is 7 months pregnant. She weighs 130 pounds. Someone beat her into a coma. What conflict could there possibly be? Kyle sighed. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket, but didn't open it. The incident took place outside the Emerald Plaza. Apparently, your wife had an altercation with a security detail for a VIP. A security detail. Victor Thorne, Kyle said. The name hit me like a physical blow. Victor Thorne, the tech billionaire. The man who owned half the city's real estate and most of its politicians. His team claims your wife was the aggressor, Kyle said, his eyes dropping to the floor. They claim she threw a coffee cup at Mr. Thorne's vehicle and then attempted to physically assault one of his bodyguards. They say they used necessary force to restrain her. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the tile floor. Restrain her? I pointed at Violet. Look at her face, Kyle. Look at her. Does that look like restraint? That looks like an execution that didn't quite finish. I know, Kyle said, putting his hands up. But Thorne's lawyers are already involved. They have 3 witnesses, his staff, who all signed affidavits saying she went crazy. Unless we find independent footage or a witness who isn't on his payroll, it's going to be hard to press charges. So he gets away with it. I'm saying it's complicated, Kyle said. Thorne was there. He watched the whole thing. He watched. Yeah, he was in the car. Didn't step out. I felt a coldness spread through my chest, freezing my blood. He watched. He sat in his air-conditioned luxury car, safe and rich, and watched his hired goons beat a pregnant woman until she stopped moving. Get out, I said. Mr. Hunter, I'm trying to help. Get out. Kyle left. I turned back to Violet. I gently took her hand. It was cold. I'm sorry, I whispered to her. I wasn't there to protect you. I promised I'd always protect you. I brushed a stray hair from her bruised forehead. But I promise you this, I said, my voice steady, devoid of any trembling now. The sadness was evaporating, replaced by a fuel that burned much hotter, much longer. They think they can buy their way out of this. They think because they have money and suits and lawyers that they're safe. I looked at her wedding ring, sitting in the plastic bag on the bedside table. They forgot who I am. I leaned down and kissed her knuckles. They forgot that I don't need a judge to decide who is guilty. I walked to the window and looked out at the Seattle skyline. Somewhere out there, in a penthouse or a mansion, Victor Thorne was probably drinking a scotch, thinking this was just another legal mess his money would clean up. He thought he had beaten a helpless woman. He didn't know he had just declared war on a Navy SEAL. And unlike him, I didn't need bodyguards. I stood by Violet's ICU door so long my legs went numb, but my head wouldn't let me sit down again. The machines kept beeping like nothing happened, like the world didn't just crack open. A nurse, Harper, according to her badge, stepped out with a clipboard. Her voice was gentle, trained, careful. Hunter, we need a signature for her valuables and intake forms. I took the pen. Where's her phone? Harper blinked. It should be logged in the bag with her purse. It's not, I said. She looked down at the clipboard like it could save her. I can check with security. My eyes stayed on hers. Do that, and don't let it sit. She hurried off. I walked to the waiting area where Detective Kyle stood with another officer, Dominic. Kyle tried to look steady, but his jaw kept tightening like he was chewing on something he didn't want to swallow. Any footage? I asked. Kyle exhaled. The building claims that section was down for maintenance. Convenient, I said. Kyle lowered his voice. Victor's team already sent legal counsel. They're saying Violet threw something at his vehicle. They're calling it an attack. I laughed once, sharp and empty. My wife is pregnant. If she threw anything, it was because she was scared. Dominic shifted like he wanted to be anywhere else. Kyle glanced toward the hallway cameras, then back to me. I'm telling you this straight. Victor is connected. We need independent evidence. Someone not on his payroll. My wife was going to buy baby clothes today, I said, feeling my throat tighten. Instead, she's wired to machines. You're asking for paperwork. Kyle's eyes dropped. I'm asking for time. Time is what Violet doesn't have, I said. Kyle's phone buzzed. He checked it, then put it away without reading anything out loud. That told me enough. Someone call you? I asked. No, he lied too fast. I stared at him until he looked away. Then I heard heels clicking behind me, clean, confident, out of place in a hospital. Amelia. Violet's sister walked toward me like she had a right to my air. Her eyes were red, but her posture stayed perfect. Hunter, she whispered. Don't, I said. She flinched. I came as soon as I heard. You heard fast, I replied. Funny how things travel when someone wants them to. Kyle watched us like he expected something to explode. Amelia tried to step closer. I stepped back. Was Violet meeting you? I asked. Amelia's eyes flickered. Just once. That was enough. She was, I said. Tell me why. I didn't make her go, Amelia said quickly. She called me and said she needed to handle something. She wouldn't explain. She wouldn't explain to you, I corrected. Or she couldn't. Amelia's hands shook as she opened her purse. She gave me something. She told me. If anything happened, I had to make sure you got it. She held out an envelope with my name on it, written in Violet's handwriting. My fingers went cold as I opened it. Inside was a note and a black key card with a gold stripe. The note was one line. If I don't come home, don't trust the system. Don't trust Amelia. My eyes rose slowly. Amelia's face drained. That, she didn't mean, she wrote this before she got attacked, I said, keeping my voice low because if it got loud, I didn't know what I'd do. Why would she write your name? Amelia's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Kyle pretended not to listen, yet he didn't move. I stepped closer to Amelia. Talk. Now. Not here, she whispered, glancing at the camera above us like it was a person. I pulled her into a side hallway near the vending machines. The hum of the fluorescent lights felt like pressure on my skull. What did Violet find? I asked. Amelia swallowed hard. She said she had proof about Victor. Proof of what? I demanded. She wouldn't tell me details, Amelia said, voice shaking. She just said she saw something she wasn't supposed to see, and she couldn't unsee it. My stomach tightened. So she went to meet him. She said she was meeting someone connected to him, Amelia corrected. At Emerald Plaza. She said she had to do it quietly. I lifted the key card. This is quiet too. What does it open? Amelia's eyes darted away. A storage unit. My grip tightened. Which one? I don't know the number, she said, panicked. She only said it's paid in cash. She told me not to use my card. She told me if I felt like I was being followed, I had to keep driving and never stop. I stared at her. Why would Violet think she'd be followed? Amelia's voice dropped. Because she said Victor doesn't just scare people. He owns people. My phone buzzed in my pocket, like it hurt her. Unknown number. Stop asking questions, or you'll lose more than your wife. A second message came right after. Come alone. 11:30 p.m. Pier 9. I read it twice. My jaw locked so hard my teeth hurt. Amelia saw my face change. What is it? I slid the phone into my pocket. Nothing. Hunter, she pleaded. Please, don't do anything stupid. I leaned in, close enough that she could hear every word. Something stupid already happened. It happened to Violet. I turned and walked back toward the ICU doors. Behind the glass, my wife lay still, fighting a battle she never volunteered for. And somewhere out there, Victor was comfortable, protected, untouched. But the text wasn't the part that scared me. The part that scared me was this. Whoever sent it knew I was in the hospital, which meant this wasn't over. It was just starting. I drove to Pier 9 like a man who was already dead. The rain slammed against the windshield, blurring the city lights into streaks of red and yellow, but my focus was sharp. Too sharp. I parked the truck 3 blocks away, between 2 abandoned shipping containers. I didn't know who sent the text, and I wasn't going to walk into a kill box without checking the perimeter first. I moved through the shadows, stepping silently on the wet pavement, my hand hovering near the pistol tucked into my waistband. The pier was empty except for one figure standing under a flickering streetlight. It wasn't a hitman. It was a girl. She looked terrified. She wore a waiter's uniform under a soaked hoodie, and she was hugging herself against the cold, shifting from foot to foot like she was ready to bolt. I stopped 10 feet away, keeping to the darkness. You're Hunter, she called out, her voice thin and shaking over the sound of the waves crashing against the wood. I stepped into the light. I am. She flinched. Oh God. You look like you want to kill someone. I do, I said calmly. Who are you? Eliza, she said. I work at the coffee shop, across from the Emerald Plaza. I sent the text. I scanned the area behind her. Clear. Why text me, Eliza? Why not go to the police station? She let out a short, bitter laugh that sounded close to a sob. I went. The officer who took my statement. He deleted the recording right in front of me. He said I didn't see anything. He said if I wanted to keep my job and my face, I should go home and forget it happened. My jaw tightened until it ached. But you saw it. I didn't just see it, she whispered, reaching into her pocket with trembling fingers. I filmed it. The world seemed to stop spinning. The rain, the waves, the wind, it all went silent. You have it? I asked. She pulled out a cheap smartphone with a cracked screen. I was on my break. I was hiding behind the patio divider. They didn't see me. I started recording when I heard the yelling. She held the phone out to me, but her hand shook so bad, she almost dropped it. I can't watch it again, she said, turning her face away toward the dark water. I can't. I took the phone. My thumb hovered over the play button. I knew that once I pressed it, there was no going back. Once I saw it, the war started. I pressed play. The video was shaky at first, framing the wet sidewalk outside the Emerald Plaza. Then it focused. My wife, Violet, stood near a black SUV. She looked small, fragile. She was clutching a manila folder to her chest, the proof Amelia had talked about. A man stepped into the frame. Mason. I recognized him instantly. Ex-military, dishonorable discharge. He was Victor Thorne's head of security, a man known for enjoying his work a little too much. In the video, Mason didn't speak. He just slapped the folder out of Violet's hands. Papers scattered across the wet pavement. Please. Violet's voice came through the tiny speaker, terrified. I just want to talk to him. The camera panned right. The rear window of the SUV rolled down. Victor Thorne sat inside. He wore a tuxedo, looking bored, a lit cigar in his hand. He looked at my wife like she was a stain on his window. He didn't say a word. He just nodded. Once. A tiny, lazy motion. Mason moved. He struck Violet across the face with a backhand that sent her crumbling to the concrete. I felt a roar build in my chest, a physical pain that felt like my ribs were breaking from the inside. On the screen, Violet tried to crawl away. She curled into a ball, wrapping her arms around her stomach. No, she screamed. I'm pregnant. Please. Mason didn't stop. He kicked her. Hard. Once in the ribs. Once in the stomach. And Victor just took a drag of his cigar. He watched. He didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He watched my wife beg for our child's life, and he looked indifferent. The video ended with Mason grabbing Violet's phone and smashing it into the ground before the SUV pulled away. The screen went black. I stood there on the pier, rain running down my face, but I felt dry. I felt hollowed out. Why? I asked, my voice sounding like it came from a stranger. Why give this to me? Eliza wiped her eyes with her sleeve. Because I'm pregnant too, she whispered. And when I saw him kick her, I knew no one else was going to help. She looked at me, pleading. You're a soldier, right? The news said you were a SEAL. I said. Then do something, she said fiercely. Make them pay. She turned and ran back toward the city lights, disappearing into the night, leaving me with the weapon that would end them all. I walked back to my truck. I sat in the driver's seat and stared at the phone. This wasn't an assault. It was an assassination. Victor Thorne had ordered the hit on my unborn child. My own phone buzzed. I answered on speaker. Mr. Hunter. It was the doctor. His voice was heavy, apologetic. We need you to come back. There's been a decline. The fetal heartbeat, it's gone. I closed my eyes. I already knew. I had just watched it happen on a cracked screen. I'm coming, I said. I hung up. I sat there for a minute, the silence in the truck deafening. I opened the center console and took out a tactical knife. I ran my thumb along the blade, feeling the bite of the steel. Victor Thorne had money. He had power. He had the police. But he had made a fatal miscalculation. He thought he had destroyed me. He didn't realize that by taking everything I loved, he had removed the only thing keeping me civilized. I started the engine. The truck growled to life. I wasn't going to the police with this video. Not yet. They would bury it. This video was for me. I put the truck in gear. I was going to the hospital to say goodbye to my son. And then I was going to introduce Victor Thorne to the consequences of his actions. The hospital room was quiet in a way that felt heavy, like the air itself was pressing down on my chest. Violet was still unconscious. Her face was turning different shades of purple and yellow as the bruises settled in, but at least she was alive. Our son wasn't. I had just signed the papers. A death certificate for a person who never took a breath. They called it fetal demise due to blunt force trauma. I called it murder. I sat in the plastic chair next to her bed, holding her hand. My thumb brushed over her knuckles, over and over, trying to remind her body that I was still here. There was a knock on the door. Not a nurse's knock, too confident, too loud. I didn't turn around. Not now. Mr. Hunter, a voice said. Smooth. Polished. I think we should talk now. It might save you a lot of pain. I slowly turned my head. Standing in the doorway was a man in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my truck. He had silver hair, perfectly combed, and a briefcase in his hand. Julian. Victor Thorne's personal attorney. The fixer. You have 5 seconds to leave, I said. My voice was low, scraping against my throat. Julian didn't leave. He stepped inside and closed the door softly behind him. He looked at Violet with a fake expression of pity that made my stomach turn. Tragic, he said. Truly tragic. Mr. Thorne is devastated by the news. I stood up. Julian raised a hand. Please, Mr. Hunter. I'm here to help. I'm here to offer a solution. A solution? I took a step toward him. You think there's a solution to this? Financial security, Julian said, placing his briefcase on the small table near the door. He clicked the latches open. Mr. Thorne understands that this incident has caused significant distress. He wants to ensure that you and your wife are taken care of. Medical bills, rehabilitation, lost wages, and compensation for the loss of the pregnancy. He pulled out a document. It was thick. $5 million, Julian said. Tax-free. Wired to an offshore account of your choice by tomorrow morning. I looked at the paper. Then I looked at him. $5 million, I repeated. It's a generous offer, Julian said, offering me a gold pen. Enough to move away. Start fresh. Maybe somewhere sunny. You could take Violet to Europe. Let her heal. And what do I have to do? I asked. Julian smiled, a tight, practiced smile. Just sign. It's a standard non-disclosure agreement. You agree that the incident was a mutual misunderstanding. You agree to drop any potential lawsuits. And, of course, you agree to hand over any digital evidence you might have acquired. He knew. They knew about the video. Or at least, they were scared enough to assume it existed. I looked at the pen. I looked at Violet, lying broken in the bed. You think my son is worth $5 million? I asked softly. Julian sighed. Mr. Hunter, let's be realists. The police have nothing. The witnesses are on our side. If you go to court, we will bury you in legal fees for 10 years. We will drag your wife's reputation through the mud. We will find every mistake she ever made, every unpaid parking ticket, every ex-boyfriend, and we will put it on the evening news. By the time we're done, the jury won't see a victim. They'll see an unstable woman who attacked a billionaire. He stepped closer. Or, you take the money. You win. You walk away rich. I picked up the pen. Julian's smile widened. Smart man. I looked at the pen in my hand. It was heavy. Expensive. You did your homework on me, didn't you, Julian? I asked. Of course. Navy SEAL. Distinguished service. We respect your background. Then you missed something in my file, I said. I snapped the pen in half. Ink exploded over my fingers, black like oil. Julian flinched. I don't negotiate with terrorists, I said. And I don't negotiate with child killers. I threw the broken pieces at his feet. Julian's face hardened. The mask of polite concern vanished, revealing the shark underneath. You're making a mistake, he said coldly. A very dangerous mistake. The mistake was sending you here, I said. Get out. Julian closed his briefcase. He didn't look scared anymore. He looked bored. You think you're tough, Julian said. You think because you've been to war, you know how to fight. But you don't know this war, Hunter. In your war, you have rules of engagement. In our world, there are no rules. He walked to the door, then stopped. You have a brother in Portland, don't you? Evan. My blood went cold. And a niece. Julian continued, checking his watch. Cute kid. What is she, 6? Walks to school every morning at 8:15. I crossed the room in 2 strides. I grabbed Julian by the lapels of his suit, and slammed him against the door. His head cracked against the wood, but he didn't struggle. He just stared at me, calm. "Touch them," I whispered, my face inches from his. "You touch one hair on their heads. Then sign the paper," Julian wheezed. "Or we start removing pieces of your family until you do." I stared into his eyes. I saw zero fear. I saw a man who knew he was backed by billions of dollars and private armies. I let him go. I smoothed out his jacket. "Get out," I said. Julian adjusted his tie. "You have 24 hours to reconsider. After that, the offer expires. And things get messy." He opened the door and walked out. I locked it behind him. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline dumping into my system. They had threatened Evan. They had threatened a 6-year-old girl. I walked back to the window. I looked out at the city. Julian was right about one thing. I didn't know how to fight their war, the war of lawsuits and media spin and settlements. But he was wrong about the rules. I wasn't going to fight their war. I was going to bring them into mine. I took out my phone. I dialed Evan. "Hunter." Evan's voice was sleepy. "Is everything okay?" "Listen to me," I said. "Pack a bag. Get Sophie. Go to the cabin. Now." "What?" "Hunter, it's 2 a.m. What's going on?" "Don't ask questions, Evan. Just drive. Don't use your credit cards. Don't turn on your GPS. Go to the cabin and wait for my call. Do you understand?" There was a pause. Evan heard the tone in my voice, the tone he hadn't heard since I came back from overseas. "Okay," Evan said. "We're leaving in 10. "I love you," I said. "Love you too, brother." I hung up. I looked at Violet one last time. I kissed her forehead. "I have to go," I whispered to her. "I can't sit here and hold your hand. If I stay, they win." I grabbed my jacket. I wasn't going to wait for 24 hours. I wasn't going to wait for the police. I was going dark. Julian wanted to talk about removing pieces. Fine. I would start with their eyes. I walked out of the room, past the nurse's station, past the security guard who was dozing off. I walked out into the cool night air. I had a list in my head. Victor, Mason, Julian. 3 names. 3 dead men walking. They just didn't know it yet. I didn't go home. Home was the first place they would look. Home was a trap. Instead, I drove to a 24-hour self-storage facility on the outskirts of the city, the one Violet had given Amelia the key for. It was a nondescript row of orange metal doors under buzzing halogen lights. I parked the truck around the back, out of sight of the main cameras, and slipped inside the gate when another car exited. I moved through the corridors, the smell of dust and damp concrete filling my lungs. Unit 402. I swiped the black key card. The light turned green. I rolled the door up and stepped inside. I expected to find boxes of old clothes, or maybe some furniture. But when I pulled the chain for the single light bulb, I froze. The unit was set up like an office. There was a folding table covered in maps, printouts, and architectural blueprints of the city's water treatment plants. There were photos of Victor Thorne taped to the wall, connected by red string to other people, city council members, health inspectors, and construction moguls. Violet hadn't just stumbled onto something. She had been building a case. My chest tightened. She had been doing this alone, protecting me, keeping me out of it because she knew. She knew exactly what I would become if I got involved. I touched a photo of Victor. "I'm involved now, Vi," I whispered. I didn't have time to read through all the files yet. I needed to secure the perimeter. I pushed the table aside and found what I was really looking for, a heavy, locked trunk in the corner. I had put it here years ago when I got out of the Navy, telling myself I'd never need it again. I broke the lock. Inside was my past. A ghillie suit, night vision monoculars, a tactical vest, high-tensile zip ties, a glass breaker, and a suppressed Sig Sauer P226 that I had acquired before my discharge. I stripped off my civilian clothes, the jeans and flannel that made me look like a grieving husband. I put on the black tactical cargo pants and the thermal long-sleeve shirt. I laced up my boots. I wasn't Hunter the husband anymore. I was an operator. I spent the next 3 days living as a ghost. I established an observation post, an OP, on the roof of an abandoned textile factory 3 blocks from Victor Thorne's penthouse tower. It was cold. It was wet. I didn't sleep. I ate protein bars and drank water from a canteen. I watched through a spotting scope. Victor's life was a fortress. He moved in a convoy of 3 armored SUVs. He never walked on the street. He went from underground garage to private elevator to penthouse. Mason was always there. He was the shadow behind Victor. He moved efficiently, scanning sectors, checking exits. He was a professional. He would be hard to get to. But a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And I found the weak link on the second night. Dominic. He was the youngest of the security detail. I recognized him from the hospital. He was the one standing next to Detective Kyle. It turned out he wasn't a cop. He was private security on Victor's payroll, dressed up to intimidate. Dominic was sloppy. When the team did their shift change at 2 a.m., the other guards stayed alert. Dominic checked his phone. He yawned. And every night, after his shift ended, he didn't go back to the barracks at the estate. He drove his personal car to a dive bar called the Rusty Anchor near the docks. He drank alone. He looked nervous. He was the crack in the armor. But before I took him, I needed to get inside their heads. I needed them to know that their money couldn't stop what was coming. Psychological warfare isn't about hurting the enemy physically. It's about making them doubt their reality. It's about making them afraid of the dark. On the 4th morning, Julian, the lawyer, walked to his car in the underground parking garage of his firm. I watched from the shadows of a stairwell 70 yards away. Julian unlocked his luxury sedan. He threw his briefcase in the passenger seat. He looked confident, arrogant. He put the key in the ignition and turned it. Click. Nothing. The engine didn't start. He tried again. Click. Frustrated, he got out and popped the hood. I watched through my scope as he stared at the engine block. He froze. The engine was fine. But sitting right on top of the battery was a single object. A baby rattle. It was blue. Cheap plastic. Julian stumbled back, slamming into the car next to him. He looked around wildly, his eyes wide, spinning in circles, searching the shadows. "Who's there?" he screamed. His voice echoed off the concrete walls. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I just watched. He pulled out his phone, his fingers fumbling, dropping it once before picking it up. He dialed fast. "Mason. It's him. He was here. No, I didn't see him. He left oh God." I smiled. A cold, humorless tightening of my lips. Panic is a virus. Julian would infect Victor. Victor would scream at Mason. Mason would tighten security. And when security gets too tight, people get tired. They make mistakes. That night, I moved to the Rusty Anchor. It was raining again. The streets were slick and black. I waited in the alley behind the bar. I knew Dominic's routine perfectly now. He would stumble out at 2:45 a.m., light a cigarette, pee on the dumpster, and then get in his car. At 2:44 a.m., the back door creaked open. Dominic stepped out. He was swaying slightly. He fumbled for his lighter, the flame illuminating his face for a second. He looked exhausted. He looked like a man carrying a heavy secret. He walked to the dumpster. I stepped out from behind a stack of pallets. I didn't run. I didn't shout. I just walked toward him, my boots silent on the wet asphalt. He heard a scuff of gravel when I was 5 feet away. He spun around, reaching for the gun under his jacket. "Who?" I didn't let him finish. I stepped inside his guard, blocked his arm with my left forearm, and drove a palm strike into his solar plexus. The air left his lungs in a wheezing gasp. He doubled over. I grabbed the back of his neck and slammed his face into the brick wall. Not hard enough to kill him, just hard enough to ring his bell. He collapsed to his knees, groaning, blood dripping from his nose. I kicked his gun away. I grabbed him by the collar and dragged him into the deeper shadows of the alley, throwing him into the back of my waiting truck. He tried to scramble up, but I put a boot on his chest. "Please," he wheezed, eyes adjusting to the dark, realizing who I was. "Hunter, don't." I leaned down close to his face. You were there, I whispered. You watched. I didn't touch her. Dominic cried, tears mixing with the blood on his face. I just drove the car. It was Mason. It was all Mason. I know, I said. I pulled a black hood over his head and zip-tied his wrists. But you're going to tell me how to get to them. I slammed the truck door. The first domino had just fallen. Now, I was going to make the rest of them crash. Dominic kept trying to talk through the hood, his voice muffled, shaking. I swear I didn't touch her. I didn't touch your wife. I drove without answering. I didn't speed. I didn't zigzag. I stayed calm, because calm doesn't make mistakes. I took him to a place I'd used years ago when I didn't want questions, an empty rental garage behind a closed machine shop. No cameras. No neighbors close enough to hear anything over the rain and the distant highway. Inside, the air smelled like oil and metal. I pulled him out of the truck and sat him on a folding chair. I zip-tied his ankles to the chair legs, not because I wanted to torture him, because I didn't trust panic. I pulled the hood off. Dominic blinked hard under the fluorescent light. He looked younger than I'd thought. Not a kid, but not a hardened monster either. Just a weak man who'd picked the wrong paycheck. He stared at my hands. Are you going to kill me? No, I said. His eyes searched mine like he couldn't understand that answer. No, he repeated. I said no, I replied. But you are going to tell me the truth. All of it. And you're going to tell it in a way I can use. Dominic swallowed. Use, like court. I took out my phone and opened the recording app. I set it on the workbench, screen facing him. Say your full name, I said. He hesitated. I leaned closer. Say it. Dominic Hayes, he whispered. Who do you work for? I asked. Victor Thorne, he said quickly. Not officially. It's contracted through a security firm, but it's him. Where were you the day Violet got attacked? I asked. His eyes watered. Driving. I was driving the second SUV. Who was in the first? I asked. Mason. Victor. 2 other guys, he said. I don't know their names, I swear. You were close enough to see, I said. Dominic shook his head hard. I tried not to. I kept my eyes forward. That's what Mason told me. Eyes forward. Don't get involved. I stared at him. That's your excuse. Dominic's voice cracked. It's not an excuse. It's me telling you what happened. I stepped back and paced once slow. I kept my voice even. Start over, I said. Why was Violet there? Don't tell me a story. Tell me the real reason. Dominic's breathing got faster. She wasn't supposed to be there. I stopped. What? I said. He licked his lips. It wasn't random. It wasn't like she walked up and spilled coffee or whatever the lawyer said. She was meeting someone. Someone Victor wanted. Who? I asked. Dominic's eyes darted to the garage door like he expected it to open. I put a hand on the metal workbench. Not threatening. Just present. Who? I repeated. Dominic whispered, Grant. The name hit me like a cold wind. Grant who? I asked. I don't know his last name, Dominic said fast. But Victor was obsessed with him. He kept saying, find Grant, find the leak. He said Grant had documents. He said Grant was going to ruin him. My throat tightened. So Violet had the documents. Dominic nodded miserably. She had a folder. Mason ripped it away like it was the only thing that mattered. I remembered the storage unit, the blueprints, the water treatment plants. My hand curled into a fist without me telling it to. What was in the folder? I asked. Dominic shook his head. I didn't see the pages clearly, but I heard Mason say the words. He said, this is Clear Spring. He was laughing, like it was a joke. Clear Spring. Violet had been circling water facilities on her maps. What is Clear Spring? I asked. Dominic's voice dropped. It's a program. A project. Something Victor funded through shell companies. It's about the city water. My stomach sank, slow and sick. You're saying my wife got beaten because of water? I said. Dominic flinched. It's not just water. It's contracts. It's chemicals. It's bribes. Victor owns the inspectors. He owns the labs that test it. He owns enough. I cut in. What was Violet doing in it? Dominic swallowed. I don't know. But Mason said she stuck her nose where it didn't belong. Victor said, he said, make sure she doesn't walk away with anything. I felt my heart thudding behind my ribs. Victor said that. I asked. Dominic nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. Yeah. I leaned in, voice quiet. Did he say anything about the baby? Dominic's eyes squeezed shut. He said, if she's pregnant, that's her problem. The room went still. I stared at Dominic so long he started shaking under my silence. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out the cracked phone Eliza had given me. I held it up. You knew someone filmed it, I said. Dominic's eyes widened. No, I didn't. Mason checked the area. Victor's lawyer came to the hospital with papers, I said. An NDA. $5 million. He wanted me to sign before I even buried my son. Dominic's mouth fell open. They offered you money. They offered me silence, I said. There's a difference. Dominic stared at the floor. That's what they do. I stepped back and pointed at the phone on the workbench that was recording him. Now you're going to help me do what they don't expect. Dominic looked up. What do you want? I want the truth in a form that survives, I said. Names, routes, times, accounts, anything linking Victor to Clear Spring. Dominic's face twisted. You don't understand. If I give you that, Mason will kill me. I shook my head. Mason doesn't get to decide that anymore. Dominic laughed, broken. You think you can protect me? I stared at him. I think you're already dead if you go back to them. So pick a death that means something. He breathed hard, then whispered, there's a drop site. A drop site for what? I asked. Documents, he said. Physical copies. Sometimes Victor doesn't trust digital. He makes people print things. Where? I asked. Dominic swallowed. A law office. Julian's office. Not the main building. A private suite. Mason uses the freight elevator after midnight. I kept my voice steady. How do you know? Because I drove him, Dominic admitted. Twice. I paced once more, thinking. This wasn't just about violence anymore. This was about a system built to erase people like Violet, and a paper trail designed to stay clean. I stopped and looked at Dominic again. You're going to do one more thing, I said. His eyes filled with fear. What? You're going to call Mason, I told him. Dominic recoiled. No. You're going to call him, I said, calm as stone. And you're going to tell him you saw me. You're going to tell him I took you. Dominic's face went white. That'll make him come for me. That's the point, I said. I want him off Victor for one night. Dominic's voice shook. Why? Because Victor hides behind walls, I said. And walls get thinner when the guard dogs panic. Dominic stared at me like he finally understood what kind of war this was. He whispered, You're not going to kill them, are you? I looked at him for a long second. I'm going to bury them in daylight, I said. With their own signatures. Dominic's hands trembled as I held my phone out to him. Call, I said. He took a breath like he was about to jump off a cliff and hit the number. It rang once, twice. Then a voice answered, low, sharp, irritated. Talk. Dominic swallowed. Mason, it's me. A pause. Why are you calling from an unknown line? Dominic's eyes locked on mine, pleading. I nodded once. Dominic forced the words out. He got me. Hunter got me. I saw him. He's coming. The silence on the other end lasted half a second too long. Then Mason's voice turned quiet. Where are you? Dominic looked at me, terrified. And at that exact moment, my own phone buzzed in my pocket. One call, then another, back to back. Hospital. I answered instantly. Harper's voice rushed out, breathless. Hunter, you need to come now. Someone just tried to move Violet out of the ICU. There was a man saying he had transfer papers. Security stopped him, but he knew her full name. He knew everything. My blood went ice cold, because that meant Victor wasn't waiting for me to make a move. He was making one first. I didn't hang up on Harper. I just said, lock the door, and dropped the phone on the passenger seat. Dominic was still staring at me, phone in hand, Mason's voice tinny and distant on the other end asking, Where are you? Dominic. I grabbed the phone from Dominic's hand and ended the call. He knows, Dominic whispered. He heard the panic. Good, I said. I grabbed my keys. Get in the truck. What about the police? Dominic asked, stumbling as I shoved him toward the door. Police are for people who have time, I said. Get in. We drove fast. Not recklessly, but with purpose. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and black, reflecting the streetlights like oil. I wasn't going to the hospital to fight security guards. I was going to secure Violet. I called Evan again. Yeah. Evan answered on the first ring. Are you at the cabin? I asked. Just pulled in. Sophie is asleep in the back. Listen to me, I said. Stay off the main roads if you leave. And keep your shotgun loaded. Hunter, what is happening? Evan's voice was tight. They tried to move Violet, I said. Move her? To where? Doesn't matter, I said. It means they know she's waking up. Or they're scared she will. I hung up as the hospital came into view. I parked in the emergency lot, ignoring the ambulance-only sign. I pulled my hood up and told Dominic, stay here. Keep your head down. If anyone opens this door who isn't me, you scream. Dominic nodded, terrified. I walked into the ER entrance. The security guard at the front desk was new, young, bored, scrolling on his phone. He didn't look up. I moved past the triage nurse, down the corridor toward the ICU. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. Outside Violet's room, 2 uniformed officers were standing. Not hospital security. PD. Kyle was there too. He looked tired. He was arguing with a man in a suit I didn't recognize, someone who looked like he billed by the minute. You can't just transfer a patient in this condition without family consent, Kyle was saying, his voice strained. We have a court order, the suit said, holding up a paper. Medical necessity. This facility isn't equipped for her specific neurological needs. Mr. Thorne has generously offered to cover her care at a private specialist clinic. She's a crime victim, Kyle shot back. She's under protective custody. She's a liability, the suit corrected smoothly. I stepped into the light. She's my wife, I said. The suit turned. He had a face that looked like it had been punched before, slightly crooked nose, eyes too close together. Mr. Hunter, he said, not missing a beat. I'm glad you're here. We were just discussing your wife's transfer. I walked up to him until I was close enough to smell his cologne. Expensive. Sandalwood and arrogance. Who signed that order? I asked. Judge Miller, the suit said. An emergency injunction. Judge Miller plays golf with Victor on Sundays, I said. The suit smiled thinly. I wouldn't know about their personal lives. I just execute the paperwork. I looked at Kyle. You letting this happen? Kyle looked pained. It's a valid order, Hunter. If I stop it, I'm obstructing. If you don't stop it, you're an accomplice to kidnapping, I said. Kyle flinched. I looked at the 2 uniformed officers. They looked uncomfortable. They knew who I was. They knew what I used to do. I'm going into that room, I said, and I'm not coming out until this piece of paper disappears. The suit stepped in front of me. I can't let you do that. The transport team is 5 minutes away. I looked at him. Really looked at him. You have 3 seconds to move, I said. Or what? The suit sneered. You'll assault an officer of the court. I didn't answer. I just moved. I sidestepped his block, grabbed his wrist, and twisted it behind his back in a motion so fluid it looked rehearsed. He yelped, dropping the paper. I kicked his knee, not to break it, but to buckle it. He went down hard. The 2 officers reached for their tasers. Don't, Kyle shouted. Stand down. I stood over the suit. Get out. He scrambled up, clutching his wrist, face red. You're done. You hear me. You're done. He ran toward the exit. I turned to Kyle. Thanks, I said. Kyle shook his head. I didn't do it for you. I did it because I saw the transfer destination. Where? I asked. St. Jude's, Kyle said. The psych ward wing. My blood ran cold. They weren't moving her to a better hospital. They were moving her to a place where they could drug her into silence legally. I need to move her, I said. You can't, Kyle said. Not legally. Then I'll do it illegally, I said. Help me get her to the service elevator. Kyle stared at me. He looked at his badge. He looked at Violet's door. Then he looked at the two officers. Take a break, guys, Kyle said. Go get coffee. I didn't see anything. The officers hesitated, then nodded and walked away. We went into the room. Violet was still out, but she looked peaceful. The swelling had gone down a little. Grab the 4 bag, I told Kyle. We worked fast. We disconnected the monitors. We transferred her to a wheelchair. I wrapped her in blankets so she just looked like a sleeping patient being discharged. We took the back way. The service elevator smelled like bleach and old food. In the parking lot, I loaded her into the passenger seat of my truck, reclining it all the way back. Dominic was in the back seat, eyes wide, silent. Where are we going? Kyle asked, standing by the open door. Somewhere they can't buy a judge, I said. Hunter, Kyle said, grabbing the door frame. If you do this, you're a fugitive. I've been a fugitive since they touched her, I said. I started the engine. Kyle stepped back. Be safe. I nodded. I drove out of the city. I didn't go to the cabin. That was too obvious. I went to the one place Victor wouldn't look. The old boatyard in the industrial district. My father's old workshop. It had no power, no heat, but it had walls and a lock. We got Violet settled on a cot in the back office. Dominic sat in the corner, shivering. What now? Dominic asked. I looked at my phone. One new message. From an unknown number. Nice trick at the hospital. But you can't hide a coma patient forever. Come to the warehouse on 4th, alone. Or we start visiting your brother. They were tracking me. Or they were guessing. Either way, the clock was ticking. I looked at Violet. She was safe for now. But for now wasn't enough. I had to end this. Dominic, I said. He looked up. Watch her, I said. If anyone comes through that door, you use this. I handed him my backup pistol. His eyes went wide. I can't shoot anyone. You watch them beat a pregnant woman, I said. You can pull a trigger to save one. I walked out into the rain. I wasn't going to the warehouse to surrender. I was going to the warehouse to test their defenses. And then I was going to burn it down. I drove to the warehouse on 4th Avenue, but I didn't park in front. That's how you get dead. I parked 3 streets over, in a dark alley behind a burnt-out bodega, and moved on foot. The rain had turned into a mist that clung to everything. It muffled sound, which was good for me. The warehouse was an old shipping distribution center. High windows, most of them broken. Chain-link fence topped with razor wire. I didn't need to go inside to know it was a trap. The text message had been an invitation to an execution. I climbed a fire escape on the building opposite the warehouse. From the roof, I had a clear view of the yard. I pulled out my thermal monocular. Heat signatures. 2 at the front gate. Static. Guards. 1 roving the perimeter. Dog. No. Human. Moving too slow. And inside, a cluster of heat near the main bay doors. For men. Maybe 5. They were waiting. I sat there in the wet gravel of the roof and watched. I watched their patrol patterns. I watched how often they checked their phones. I watched how they held their weapons. These weren't rent-a-cops like Dominic. These were pros. Mercenaries. Probably ex-Blackwater or something similar. Victor had escalated. Good. Expensive mercenaries expect to get paid. And when the money stops, loyalty stops. I took out the phone I had taken from Dominic. I scrolled through his contacts until I found a number labeled Payroll, HR. It wasn't HR. It was the accountant for the security firm. I didn't call. I sent a text. Transfer initiated. Authorization code, Clear Spring 0. Confirm receipt. It was a bluff. But Clear Spring was the keyword Dominic had given me. It was the poison pill. 2 minutes later, a reply. Who is this? That code is flagged for level 1 clearance only. I typed back. This is level 1. The accounts are being frozen by the DOJ. Move the assets now or lose them. I waited. Panic is predictable. If they thought the feds were freezing accounts, they would move money. And to move money, they had to log in. I switched to my own burner phone. I had a buddy from the teams who worked CyberNow. I'd sent him the firm's server IP address an hour ago. They just logged in, his text came through. Got the handshake. I'm in. Drain it, I replied. Every cent, send it to the charity for clean water. Done in 3, 2, 1. They are broke. I lowered the phone and looked back at the warehouse. It would take about 10 minutes for the news to trickle down. I waited. 7 minutes later, one of the guards at the gate checked his phone. He stiffened. He said something to the other guard. The other guard checked his phone. He started typing furiously. Then the shouting started. The rover stopped walking. He pulled out his phone, made a call, and started yelling. I couldn't hear the words, but the body language was universal. Where's my money? Inside the warehouse, the cluster of heat signatures broke apart. The bay door rolled open. A man stormed out. Mason. He was screaming at the guards. He pointed a gun at one of them. The guard didn't back down. He pointed his rifle back at Mason. Civil War. I smiled. Now, I whispered. I didn't shoot. I didn't need to. I just needed to add a little chaos to the fire. I took out the suppressed pistol. I aimed not at a person, but at the transformer box on the pole near the gate. Fut! Sparks showered down like fireworks. The lights in the yard died. The floodlights on the warehouse flickered and went black. Screaming. Confusion. We're under attack. Mason yelled. Hold the perimeter. Screw the perimeter. One of the mercenaries shouted back. The account is 0. I'm not dying for free. An engine roared. The gate guards jumped into an SUV and peeled out, tires screeching, leaving the gate wide open. The rover ran for his own car. Within 30 seconds, Victor's elite army had dissolved into a bunch of angry men realizing they'd been stiffed. Only Mason remained. Mason and maybe 2 diehard loyalists inside. I stood up. The odds were now 3-1. Manageable. I climbed down the fire escape. I moved across the street, invisible in the darkness. I slipped through the open gate. Mason was shouting into a radio, trying to rally troops that were already halfway to the interstate. Cowards, he screamed. I'll kill you all. He was standing in the open bay door, backlit by the emergency lights inside. A perfect silhouette. I could have taken the shot. Center mass. Ended him right there. But death was too easy. I wanted him to know who did it. I wanted him to feel the fear Violet felt. I holstered the pistol. I pulled out my knife. I moved along the wall, stepping over coils of wire and crates. I got within 20 feet. Mason, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the silence like a whip. He spun around, raising his weapon. Hunter, he hissed. Come out and die. You're all alone, Mason, I said, my voice echoing from the shadows. Victor isn't here. Your men are gone. It's just you and the bill. He fired blindly into the dark. Bang, bang, bang. Bullets chipped the concrete above my head. I didn't flinch. You kicked a pregnant woman, I said, moving closer as he reloaded. You felt big then, didn't you? She was in the way. Mason yelled, backing up into the warehouse. She was a complication. She was my wife, I said. I stepped into the light of the doorway. Mason raised his gun. I threw a handful of ball bearings I'd grabbed from the workshop floor. They clattered against the metal wall to his right. He flinched, turning toward the sound. That split second was all I needed. I closed the distance. I didn't stab. I tackled. We hit the concrete hard. His gun skittered away. He was strong, military strong, but I was fighting with the weight of a dead son on my back. I drove a knee into his ribs. I heard something crack. He grunted, trying to gouge my eyes. I caught his wrist and twisted. Snap! He screamed. I stood up, breathing hard. He lay there, clutching his broken wrist, gasping. Where is Victor? I asked. Mason spat blood. Go to hell. I stepped on his broken wrist. He screamed again. Where is he? The estate, he shrieked. He's at the estate. He's trying to leave the country. I stepped back. Get up, I said. What? He wheezed. Get up. We're going for a ride. Where? To the police station, I said. You're going to confess. And then, I'm going to visit Victor. I zip-tied his good hand to his belt. I dragged him to my truck. The warehouse was silent. The trap had failed. And now, the hunter was coming for the king. I parked Mason's black SUV a mile down the coast road, hidden in a cluster of pines. I left Mason in the back, zip-tied to the frame of the seat, conscious but gagged. I didn't need him for this part. He was just the package I'd deliver later. I moved through the woods that bordered Victor's estate. The rain was coming down harder now, a cold sheet that masked the sound of my boots on the wet earth. The estate sat on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. It was surrounded by a 12-foot stucco wall topped with sensors. Floodlights swept the grounds in rhythmic, overlapping arcs. It wasn't a home. It was a compound designed by a man who knew he had enemies. But Victor had made a mistake. He relied on technology, and technology makes people lazy. I reached the perimeter wall on the north side, the blind spot near the generator housing. I checked the timing of the cameras. Left, right, 5-second delay. I vaulted the wall in the pause, landing silently on the wet grass. I didn't rush. Rushing gets you killed. I crouched in the shadows of the landscaping, scanning the grounds. There were 4 guards patrolling the lawn. They looked agitated. They were checking their phones, probably looking for the wire transfers that I had drained an hour ago. They weren't watching the shadows. They were watching their bank accounts. I moved toward the generator shed. If I cut the power, the backup batteries would kick in, but there would be a 30-second lag. In that 30 seconds, the electronic locks on the patio doors would default to open for fire safety. I didn't use explosives. I used a simple pair of bolt cutters on the main conduit line. Snap! A shower of sparks lit up the shed. The hum of the estate died instantly. The floodlights went black. The security cameras froze. Power failure. Sector 4. A voice screamed over the radio I had taken from the warehouse. Check the breakers. Go, go. Flashlights' beams sliced through the darkness. The guards on the lawn started running toward the shed, their boots thumping heavy on the sod. They were running toward the distraction. I ran toward the house. I reached the back patio just as the emergency lights flickered on, bathing the house in a dim, red glow. I tried the sliding glass door. It slid open smoothly. I was in. The kitchen was empty, smelling of expensive coffee and fear. I moved into the main hallway. The house was massive, marble floors, high ceilings, art that cost more than my life insurance. Who's there? A guard stepped out of the hallway to my left. He was big, wearing tactical armor. He raised his rifle. I didn't stop. I closed the distance before he could acquire the target. I grabbed the barrel of his rifle with my left hand, shoving it toward the ceiling as he pulled the trigger. Bang! The shot went into the drywall, deafening in the enclosed space. I drove my right elbow into his throat. He gagged, stumbling back. I swept his leg, sending him crashing to the marble floor. Before he could scramble up, I delivered a single, calculated kick to his temple. He went limp. I took his radio and crushed it under my boot. One down, I whispered. I moved to the stairs. The master suite was on the top floor. That's where men like Victor always went. High ground. I heard shouting from the floor below. Breach. We have a breach in the main house. Let them come. They were fighting a ghost in a house they didn't know how to defend. I reached the second-floor landing. 2 more guards were coming down the hall, weapons drawn. I didn't have cover. I kicked open the door to a guest bedroom and rolled inside just as they opened fire. Bullets chewed up the doorframe, sending splinters flying. He's in the bedroom. Pin him down. They were advancing. Professional tactics. Fire and maneuver. I looked around the room. I saw a heavy oak dresser. I pushed it over. Crash. Then I broke the window. The guards heard the glass break. They assumed I was bailing out. They kicked the door open, rushing to the window. He jumped, one yelled. I stepped out from behind the bathroom door. No, I said. I didn't. They spun around, but it was too late. I used the taser I'd taken from the first guard. The first prong hit the lead man in the neck. He convulsed and dropped. The second guard tried to swing his rifle, but I was already inside his guard. I grabbed his vest and slammed him into the wall, driving a knee into his solar plexus. He folded. I didn't kill them. They were just rented muscle. I left them groaning on the floor and sprinted to the third floor. The air up here was different. It was quiet. At the end of the long hallway, there was a set of double mahogany doors. Victor's sanctuary. There were no guards here. He had pulled them all downstairs to protect the perimeter. He had left himself exposed. I walked down the hall. My boots left wet footprints on the expensive Persian rug. I could hear movement inside the room. The sound of drawers opening and closing. The frantic zip of a suitcase. He was running. I checked my magazine. Full. I checked my breathing. Steady. I wasn't a SEAL anymore. I wasn't a husband anymore. I was a consequence. I reached the door. It was locked. I didn't pick it. I stepped back and kicked the lock mechanism with everything I had. The wood splintered with a loud crack. The door swung open. Victor Thorne was standing by a wall safe behind his massive desk. He was shoving stacks of cash into a leather bag. He looked up, his eyes wide, his face pale and sweating. He held a small silver pistol in his hand. "Stay back," he screamed. His voice cracked, high and terrified. I walked into the room. I didn't raise my weapon. I didn't need to. "You have nowhere to go, Victor," I said. He pointed the gun at me, his hand shaking so bad the barrel was vibrating. "I have money," he babbled. "I have millions. Take it. Take the bag." I kept walking. "I don't want your money," I said. "What do you want?" he shrieked, backing up until he hit the window. "What do you want from me?" I stopped 10 feet away. "I want you to feel it," I said. "Feel what?" "The fear," I said. "The fear my wife felt when she saw your men coming. The fear my son felt when his heart stopped." Victor pulled the trigger. Click. He stared at the gun. He hadn't chambered a round. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. "My turn," I said. I took a step forward. The siege was over. The judgment was about to begin. Victor stared at the useless silver pistol in his hand, then threw it at me in a spasm of panic. It bounced off my tactical vest and clattered to the floor. "Please," he whimpered, sliding down the wall until he was sitting on the floor. "I didn't mean for the baby to die. That was Mason. Mason went too far." I stood over him. He looked small, pathetic, a man who had ordered deaths from a leather chair but had never seen one up close. "You watched," I said. My voice was low, vibrating in the quiet room. "You sat in your car, smoking a cigar, and you watched." I was scared, he lied. I froze. I reached down and grabbed him by the lapels of his tuxedo shirt. I hauled him up like a rag doll. "You're going to come with me," I said. "Where?" He gasped, his feet dangling. "To see your work." I dragged him out of the room. He struggled, kicking and clawing, but I walked him down the hallway like he was an unruly child. We passed the unconscious guards on the second floor. Victor's eyes went wide. "You killed them," he whispered. "They're sleeping," I said. "Unlike my son." We went out the back way. The rain was pouring now, soaking his expensive shirt instantly. He slipped on the wet grass, falling to his knees. I yanked him up. "Walk," I ordered. I marched him to the SUV where I had left Mason. I opened the trunk. Mason was awake. His eyes darted from me to Victor. He saw his boss, wet, crying, broken, and he stopped struggling. He knew. I pulled Mason out and shoved him next to Victor. "Get in the front," I told Victor. "You drive." Victor stared at me. "What? Drive?" I said, pointing the gun at Mason's head. "Or your security chief dies right here." Victor scrambled into the driver's seat. I put Mason in the passenger seat and sat in the back, gun trained on both of them. "Where are we going?" Victor asked, his voice trembling. "The county morgue," I said. Victor froze. No, I can't go there." "Drive," I said. The drive was silent. The only sound was the rain and Victor's jagged breathing. We arrived at the county medical examiner's office 30 minutes later. It was a brick building, nondescript, cold. I marched them inside. The night attendant, a tired man named Carl I knew from my time on the force, looked up. He saw the gun. He saw the bruises on Mason. He saw the fear on Victor. He didn't reach for the alarm. He just nodded slowly. Hunter, Carl said. I heard about the baby. I'm sorry. Open the bay, Carl, I said. He buzzed us through. The air inside was sterile and freezing. The smell of formaldehyde and steel. We walked past rows of metal drawers. Stop, I said. We stopped in front of drawer 104. Open it, I told Victor. Victor shook his head violently. No, I can't. Please don't make me. I stepped closer. Open it. Victor's hand shook as he reached for the handle. He pulled. The drawer slid out on silent rollers. Inside was a small bundle wrapped in a hospital blanket. Tiny. Still. Victor looked. He slapped a hand over his mouth and retched, stumbling back. Mason looked away, closing his eyes. Look at him, I roared. The sound echoed off the tile walls. I grabbed Mason's head and forced him to look. That is what you did, I said. That is a person. That is my son. Mason started to cry. Ugly, ragged sobs. I didn't know. Mason choked out. I didn't know she was that far along. You didn't care, I said. I looked at Victor. He was curled on the floor, weeping. You wanted to erase the problem, I said to him. Well, here he is. He's not a problem anymore. He's a corpse. I stood there for a long moment, letting the silence crush them. Then I heard sirens. Lots of them. Screaming closer. I looked at Carl. You called them? I asked. I had to, Hunter, Carl said softly. But I told them to come quiet. I told them you weren't shooting. I nodded. It's okay, Carl. I looked at Victor and Mason. This is where it ends, I said. Not in a penthouse. Not in a boardroom. Here. In the cold. With the dead. The doors burst open. Kyle ran in, followed by 4 officers. They had guns drawn, but lowered them when they saw me standing with my hands at my sides. Hunter, Kyle yelled. Step away from them. I stepped back. They're all yours, I said. Victor looked up at the police like they were saviors. Thank God. Arrest him. He kidnapped us. He threatened to kill us. Kyle walked over to Victor. He looked down at him with pure disgust. Victor Thorne, Kyle said, pulling out handcuffs. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, and tampering with evidence. Victor's jaw dropped. What? No, I'm the victim here. We have the files, Victor, Kyle said, snapping the cuffs on tight. We have the transfers. We have Dominic's testimony. We have the video. Victor went limp. Officers grabbed Mason, hauling him up. He didn't fight. He looked relieved to be going to jail instead of staying in that room with me. Kyle walked over to me. You okay? He asked. I looked at the open drawer. At the small bundle. No, I said. I'm not. You did it, Hunter, Kyle said. You got them. They're never getting out. I know, I said. I reached out and gently slid the drawer closed. The click of the latch sounded like the final period on a sentence. Take me in, I said to Kyle. I kidnapped them. I assaulted them. I broke the law. Kyle looked at me. He looked at the officers. I didn't see you kidnap anyone, Kyle said loudly. I saw 2 fugitives surrender at the morgue, and I saw a grieving father identifying a body. The other officers nodded. Go home, Hunter, Kyle whispered. Go to Violet. I looked at him, then at the door. I walked out into the rain. The squad cars were flashing red and blue, lighting up the night. I watched them shove Victor into the back of a cruiser. He looked small. He looked finished. I got into my truck. I had one more stop to make. The hospital. Violet was waiting. And for the first time in days, I didn't have to look over my shoulder. I walked back into the ICU room 3 days later. It was morning. The sun was cutting through the blinds, making stripes of gold on the linoleum floor. It felt strange to see sunlight. For the last week, I had only lived in the dark. Violet was awake. She was sitting up, propped by pillows. The swelling in her face had gone down, leaving yellow-green bruises that looked like old maps. Her jaw was still wired, but her eyes were open, and they were looking at me. I stopped in the doorway. I felt like I shouldn't be here. I felt like I had blood on me that wouldn't wash off. Hi, I whispered. Violet tried to smile, but winced. She reached out a hand. I crossed the room and took it. Her skin was warm. Real. She looked at my face, the cuts, the sleepless circles under my eyes. She squeezed my hand. Then she looked down at her stomach. She knew. The doctors had told her while I was being debriefed by the FBI. Tears spilled over her lashes, silent and fast. She didn't make a sound. She couldn't with the wires, but her chest heaved. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled her into me. I buried my face in her neck. "I'm sorry," I choked out. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there." She shook her head against my shoulder. She tapped my chest. Boom, boom. Boom, boom. Heartbeat. She was saying, "You're here now?" The trial 6 months later wasn't a circus. It was an execution by paperwork. With the evidence from the storage unit, the Clear Spring documents proving Victor was poisoning the city water to save money on filtration, the federal government stepped in. Victor Thorne didn't get bail. He sat in court wearing an orange jumpsuit that looked 2 sizes too big. He looked old. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a permanent look of confusion. Mason pled guilty to avoid the death penalty. He got life without parole. He never looked at me once during the sentencing. When the jury foreman read the verdict for Victor, guilty on all counts, the courtroom didn't cheer. It just let out a breath it had been holding for a year. Victor stood up. He looked at me across the aisle. I looked back. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel hate. I just felt done. He opened his mouth to say something, maybe to beg, maybe to curse me. But the marshals turned him around and marched him out. He was just a man. A bad man, but just a man. And now he was a number. We didn't go to Europe like Julian had suggested. We didn't move to a sunny island. We went to the cabin. Violet healed slowly. The wires came off her jaw. She learned to walk without limping. We planted a garden, tomatoes, peppers, and a row of white roses against the fence. We didn't talk about the baby much, not with words. But every evening, at sunset, we walked down to the lake. There was a small stone there, under a cedar tree. No name on it, just a date. We would sit there and watch the water turn purple and gold. One evening, a year after the verdict, Violet turned to me. "Hunter," she said. Her voice was strong again. "Yeah, I think I'm ready," she said. I looked at her. "Ready for what?" "To try again," she whispered. She took my hand and placed it on her stomach. "We can't replace him," she said. "But we can't let them win by stopping us from living." I looked at her. This woman who had been beaten, broken, and targeted by a billionaire, and who was still the strongest person I had ever met. "Okay," I said. Tears pricked my eyes. "Okay. The world thinks justice is a gavel banging on a desk. It isn't. Justice is waking up in the morning without looking over your shoulder. Justice is planting a garden. Justice is the quiet sound of your wife breathing next to you in the dark. I still have the tactical gear in the trunk. I still clean the pistol once a month. Because the world is full of monsters. But I'm not hunting them anymore. I'm guarding the garden. And this time, nothing is getting inside the walls." Author's note to you. That was the end of Hunter and Violet's journey. It's hard to say goodbye to characters who fought this hard, isn't it?